Okay, Sister Coley and Sister Tawab, this video is for you. You wanted to know the difference between the Jewish calendar and the biblical calendar. And now I suppose it's kind of complicated. I'm gonna try to make this really short and concise. So let me start with the Jewish calendar. When we were given the times to observe the Moedim, or the appointed times, that was for all of Israel to do. The first of the year started with the month of Abib, when the barley started to grow green ears, meaning that it wasn't ripe yet, it was fresh. That's when we left Egypt. That's when Moshe knew to leave Egypt, and that's what started our year in the spring. We didn't go by the vernal or any of the equinoxes that the pagan system does today. That's number one. And that was for all of Israel to observe. And of course, things were done. We had the weeks that were 7 days, the seventh day being the Sabbath. And then when you got to a number of weeks, you would look for a new moon, known as the Molad in Hebrew. And the new moon would have been a slither or a crescent as we know today. A new moon is not what you know on your calendar as a blacked out moon, because why would Yahweh send out shepherds and people in the field to go look for a moon that isn't there? This is known as the sun-moon conjunction. We don't go by that, okay? So that's what did our years, and I'm going to give you a brief rundown real quick. We start and end the days at sunset, and that's in Genesis 1, verse 5. We start the weeks at day 1 and end on day 7, the Sabbath. That's in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15 through 16. We start months with the sighting of the new moon, meaning that slither I told you about. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1. We start the years in the month of barley, where they will be harvestable by the middle of that month. That's in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4 through 14 again. And that's just the simplified version of what we were doing in the Bible, in the scripture. When we became a nation, we got lazy. Not only did we start to be ensnared by the other mighty ones, if you will, but their worship started to impact our own. And the first thing we did was we made ourselves a king. We wanted King Saul to rule over us. That wasn't in the plan of Yahweh, but Yahweh gave it to us anyhow. We wanted to be like the pagan nations. Over time, we got lazy and stopped going out to look for ourselves to see when the new months occurred, when these dates were supposed to happen, so that we knew when to keep the appointed times. And we started leaving that to the duty of the high priest. The high priest being from one of the tribes of Levi. No, all the tribes of Levi were not high priests. The Karaites were one of them though. And they were the ones in charge of going out, looking for the new moons and so forth. And then they would send out couriers throughout the kingdom and let them know when these dates or these appointed times would be observed. Now, when the high priest was disbanded after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by Titus, the Jews needed some type of system to still conduct their sightings. So there was a thing known as a Jewish High Council called the Sanhedrin. Nowhere in scripture is this authorized, by the way, but they did it on their own accord. And the Sanhedrin had a president known by the name of Hillel II. He had been told, like many others by the Romans at the time, not to observe anything in scripture on the pain of death. That means they couldn't go out and observe the months by the moon as we were told to do so. And the New Year's being by the ears of barley in the month of Abib. And so what he did was he devised his own calendar to calculate when these Moedim were to fall. Now, it's not really that accurate. It was kind of accurate for its time back then, but it's really not now that we look back in time. As a matter of fact, it's so complicated that Hillel had to add an extra month. On the Jewish calendar, you'll see a month known as Tammuz. Now, if you go over in scripture, you'll see that the people were weeping for Tammuz in Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14. Tammuz is no other than the reborn Nimrod, or Horus, who was Osiris, a pagan deity. Now, why would you have a pagan deity who many consider to be the anti-Messiah, incorporated in the so-called Jewish calendar? If that isn't a big indication that this is Lucifer's work, I don't know what else is. Anyhow, through Hillel's ingenuity, all the Jewish captives and all over the known realm were able to now participate in these days. It was so hard to compute that the Jewish high priest, or the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high council rather, had to continually modify this calendar, which is still the practice to the day, and is very pagan, this Jewish calendar. I urge you to stay away from it. It's nowhere in scripture, and we're told in scriptures not to add or to subtract anything from the word of Yahweh. And this means dealing with this calendar as well. And again, the calendar in itself was invented by Hillel in the village of Tiberias in the year 359 CE. And it's based off of Babylonian astronomical mathematical alignment to help to calculate the moon and the sun conjunction, meaning that when the moon is invisible because it's in conjunction with the sun. The problem is that this conjunction is never mentioned in scripture, nor is it even an important thing, or used to justify or to calculate the first month of Abib, which is in the spring. So here you have a thing where, do you follow Jewish fables as we're told about in scripture, or do you keep the Creator's commands? Last thing I want to say is that the Karaites, who are a clan from the tribe of Levi, because again, all the tribes of Levi did not serve as high priests, but the Karaites did. There are some Karaites still claiming their ancestry in the remotest parts of the world, and they can test to the utmost degree this Jewish calendar, these people, because they were the ones keeping the original biblical calendar to begin with. They don't go by the Jewish calendar. And there are still some Yahudim and even modern day Israel who do not even go by the so-called Jewish calendar. It is a man-made thing, and it is no better than the pagan Christian calendar. Both of them have Lucifer's trademark all over them. And again, I urge you to abstain from these Jewish fables and get back to our Hebraic covenant and our Hebraic commandments given from our Creator in the scripture. Anyhow, two good sources that you may want to look into is the biblical calendar and the What is a Biblical New Moon pamphlet from the YRM. It's available for free, the YRM.com, and that's a good source to look into. It gives you the basic rudiments of what I'm telling you, and then you can start your journey from there. When this subject is fairly complicated, but in a nutshell, the Jewish calendar is it's not where you want to be. Anyway, if you have any questions, please hit me up. I hope this video was informative to you, and man, shalom.